So I wanted to start off by playing a little game, a little word-term association game. I'm going to say a couple words together, a couple terms, and just sit with it for a second. See if it feels right, how it feels for you. So let's start with an elementary school and a workforce development center. Or how about an affordable housing developer and a hospital? And lastly, how about a museum and a public transportation authority? So if any of those things were odd or sounded foreign to you, that's expected. For some of us in the world of community development and economic development, we know those things to be anchor institutions. And so anchor institutions, as defined by the Anchor Institution Task Force, and yes, there is a task force that studies anchor institutional work, they define anchor institutions as these place-based organizations that are rooted in their communities, and they are rooted in their localities, and it's really hard for them to leave if they wanted to, even in the midst of capital flight. And so the Anchor Institution Task Force goes on to say the challenge with engaging anchors is that they have to understand that they are stable local assets that are critical players, essentially, in helping address our critical social issues like housing, economic development, transportation, education. And so, what are anchor institutions? They're, at the very fundamental level, our eds and meds, our higher ed institutions, community colleges, universities, our hospitals, healthcare centers. But they go way beyond that. They are our libraries, your art institutions, community foundations. And then there's your social anchors. Your grandma on the block who's been there forever. She knows everything that's going to go down. All the development can happen around her. She's not going anywhere. She's the one who's been advocating for that community, or maybe she is a collection of residents, a neighborhood organization. Those social anchors oftentimes are the gatekeepers of those communities. So you can't even do work in those communities if you don't engage those social anchors. And I'll talk a little bit about my experience getting into this work by way of the grandma on the block. So where do these things happen? This is not a new concept. Anchors have always existed, these large institutions rooted in communities. But the philosophy of coalescing anchors to address modern-day post-industrial American issues in cities that have seen globalization and jobs go away, public disinvestment, the movement is becoming more and more broad, more and more profound in cities and communities that are collaborating and bringing their anchors together. And so, just some very few models I wanted to touch on, which are really scratching the surface, are things like the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. Okay, we got some folks from Jersey in the house. So they've done amazing things with not only just, they've literally redeveloped their exterior so you can actually see into the building and they can see out into the community. That's how the executive director describes it. And he says, we've taken that concept of visibility with our surrounding community and transferred that concept to our arts programming. So community artists have a space in New Jersey's Performing Arts Center. The Performing Arts Centers and the shows that come through have a road show they do through the neighboring community as well as coalescing with the other anchors in the city like Rutgers University, public schools. And so the Performing Arts Center is doing amazing stuff in Newark. Another great example is the Cleveland Greater University Circle initiative, where the Cleveland Foundation, children's hospitals, neighborhood organizations, they all came together and literally rerouted streets to connect previously siloed and cut off communities and anchors. And they wrapped it all in programming and supports and housing development. The University of San Francisco and the city of San Francisco believe so much in anchor institutional work that they go as far as saying anchor institutions' obligation to their surrounding communities is a human rights issue. And so they actually charged the work of anchor institution work in San Francisco to the city's Human Rights Commission, office. And so the Human Rights Commission office and the University of San Francisco work hand in hand to coalesce all of the anchors in that city. And lastly, which kind of fed into my exposure into this world, is the Syracuse Connective Corridor. Now, the Connective Corridor is an actual bus the university took off the public transit system, wrapped it in ongoing resident artists' work that were cycling through the University School of Visually Performing Arts, resident faculty, and then they curated art on the bus. So this bus is a free bus route from Syracuse University through downtown Syracuse into the near west side, which is the neighborhood that is adjacent to downtown, to create this campus to community corridor, a free bus route for students and community members to hop on and off at any point along the corridor. This isn't also a new model. Durham Bull and Duke University does the same thing. We see remnants here with our friends from Avenue Concept and RIPTA, okay? So this is not anything new, but you see how very niche and specific it is, okay? So my introduction to this work was by way of the Near West Side Initiative in Syracuse University, where I worked before I came to Rhode Island. And it was profound. We did amazing things in the Near West Side. We created over $100 million of economic development. We created renters into homeowners, revitalized properties, created social enterprises, all of this amazing work. In fact, this is kind of our spray chart of the Near West Side from all of our initiatives that we've done. And I'm going to touch on a few, but I want to go back to that grandma on the block, because none of this work was possible, would be possible, or would continue to be possible today without her okay. That's Mary Alice. Better give Mary Alice a round of applause. So, if you don't know Mary Alice, she goes by the name Queen Bee, or everyone's grandma in the West Side. And so, Mary Alice was the one who said, when Syracuse University, by way of then Chancellor Nancy Kanner, who's now at Rutgers, aiding in that amazing stuff with the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, when she was launching this initiative to be engaged and take the university off the hill and into the community, Mary Alice was the one that said, hold up. If we're going to do anything in this community, it's going to be with us. Not for us, not by us, not on us, not imposed on us. It's going to be with us. And so Mary Alice, when I asked her about this presentation and if I could use her picture, she said, you sure can, and you better let everybody know I'm still asking questions about people who come into my community. And so we have a Mary Alice in all of our communities. Sometimes it's a couple of Mary Alices, right? It's our neighborhood organizations. But none of this work was possible without her blessing. She's the gatekeeper. She's who the people trust. Doesn't matter how much you want to support, if you don't have the trust of the people, then they will never fully embrace you, and rightfully so. And so these ambassadors are the ones who are critical to the success of anchor institutional work. So what did we do there? We did amazing things like create a social enterprise and workforce development program that was driven by partners in the city who were doing workforce development around green infrastructure. But we had amazing school of design, so we had industrial design faculty and students creating high-end furniture using repurposed timbers from the buildings we rehabbed. A business for the community, by the community, sourced in the community, made and trained in the community, okay? We took architecture faculty and students and partnered with our neighborhood community development corporation home headquarters and redesigned these blighted properties into these funky LEED platinum certified energy efficient homes. Now, before you clap, because I was expecting a beautiful clap for these beautiful homes, it's important to know that not all of these homes were for people not in the community. We converted renters into homeowners to occupy these homes, okay? And then the other important piece to this is that you can diversify and revitalize a neighborhood, okay? But what happens is when you make anything attractive, people want it, right? And then when people want something and demand goes up, so does the price. And so we knew that if we were going to revitalize this neighborhood, we needed to diversify the income, right? So we had to attack it from both ends. But the problem with diversifying income and doing things like this is that I can sell a dollar home to somebody who is going to invest a couple $100,000 to fix it up, or I can renovate a home to its now higher value than what it was before, and someone will come in and buy it and want to be a part of the magic, and unintentionally increase the property taxes for everyone else in that house, in that block. And so what happens is because that neighborhood is predominantly renters and not homeowners, those costs get passed to the landlords who then up the rent. And unintentionally, you displace people by moving in and unintentionally increasing everyone's property tax. So we actually lobbied at the State House in Albany and said, give us some time. We don't control the free market system in real estate, but we are cognizant of displacement. So give us some time as we diversify the income in this neighborhood, and we were able to pass legislation that locked in property tax rates to the market rate for several years and then increased incrementally to its true tax rate. That was the only way we could, at the moment, slow down displacement while we were doing everything else. And I think one of the most profound things we did was the neighborhood is is anchored by a grocery store, one of the last grocers in Syracuse, No James Supermarket. And No James shares a parking lot with the West Side Health Clinic, where everyone went to. Now, the Near West Side is overrepresented negatively in all of the social determinants you could think of, poor education outcomes, poor health outcomes. So the health and access to food was important for us. So we were able to leverage our university resources, the Lerner Center for Public Health at SU, and St. Joe's Hospital, which runs the clinic that the supermarket shares the parking lot with. And we were able to expand both organizations, both facilities, to double their size, to serve more people. But we started something called a Healthy Shoppers Rewards program. And because Syracuse University has a really robust school of information technology, the iSchool, we engaged faculty and students to create an app. So they created an app called Rosie. And so any resident in the neighborhood can opt into this program, get their little key card, and then shop. Everything in the grocery store was scaled from 0 to 100, 100 being the healthiest. So every time you swipe, every time you cash out, those analytics are shot across the street to the clinic. And anyone who opted into this program got a free nutritionist. So the nutritionist can print out these analytics and say, Joe, you're eating too much Fruit Loops, need a little Special K. Print you out a coupon, walk right across the street and go get it. And in extreme cases, I'll write you a prescription for fruits and veggies, okay? And this leads me to where we are right now, because this stuff is driven by vision, purpose, belief, philosophy. And presidents aren't forever at universities. Directors aren't forever at these anchor institutions. And so if it is not a long-standing commitment, then your anchor, as anchors do, when you unearth them, right, the boat drifts away. And such was the case as leadership changed in Syracuse, at Syracuse University, excuse me. And so, slowly but surely, as the direction changed, as importance and priorities changed, which did not consider the Near West Side, they had to slowly and slowly unravel. And we lost No James Supermarket to a commercial competitor because they could no longer compete. And that is the story of the Near West Side Initiative that is now operating in bare bones. Now, in Syracuse University's defense, they're not the only anchor in town, okay? And so this isn't a jab at Syracuse University, but more of a point around a holistic investment, okay? And this is where Rhode Island has a unique advantage. What you see here are just the very fundamental level of anchors in Rhode Island the eds and meds, higher ed institutions and hospital centers and healthcare centers. You see a huge space of emptiness in most of the western part of the state, but let me also remind you, you can drive up and down east or west in an hour, okay? So somebody from New York who takes a train from Brooklyn to the Bronx, that's a 2-hour train ride during rush hour if it's going local, okay? So I don't even have the libraries, your galleries, your community foundations, your Mary Alice's, the grandmas. I don't have any of those, okay? And so that will look a lot fuller. And here's Providence, which has an actually equitable spread, okay? A pretty equitable spread of anchors, again, just the first layer, okay? So let me leave you with this. Let me just leave you with a couple what-ifs. What if Rhode Island could solve its affordable housing crisis, its employment crisis, its health disparities, and its transportation woes all at the same time? What if the men and women coming home from prison, our huge proportion of single mothers going to school, our veterans coming home, our homeless population, all these folks need homes. We also have a goal in Rhode Island to have 70% of the residents have some sort of post-secondary degree. But it is unfair to just charge that to the public institutions. I represent a private institution. And my private institution does work in the prison, we do work in the training school, and we made that moral choice. But what if everyone else owned a piece of this state? Not their city, not their neighborhood, but Rhode Island is small enough to own a piece, for every anchor institution to own a piece of this state. And then we can change the landscape of how we move and how we think and set a national model, not just in Providence, not just Avenue Concept in Providence, but Avenue Concept buses in Barrington, in Woonsocket, right? Ran by RIPTA, quarterbacked by the anchor institutions in those neighborhoods, Salve Regina in Newport, Bryan up in Smithfield. Providence has enough to cover the entire bus route in Providence, right? So what if we just stopped asking questions, and what if we just did it? There is no better place and there is no better time than now. Thank you.